Some people in China are being given fake vaccines. And fake Chinese vaccines could even be spreading around the world. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. For a year, the world has been suffering from the CCP virus, the coronavirus that spread because of the Chinese Communist Party's initial lies and cover-up. And now, the CCP will save the world by exporting vaccines for the virus it spread. Just like it saved the world by keeping the coronavirus within its borders, which was an actual propaganda line Chinese state-run media used back in February 2020. And then, when that stopped being true, the Chinese Communist Party saved the world by exporting face masks. Of course, that also kind of backfired. So now they've moved on to exporting vaccines. I just pray to Mao those exported vaccines are safe and effective, because a substantial number of the vaccine doses being given out in China are fake. And I don't mean fake like only effective half the time, like the official Chinese vaccine being used now in Brazil. That's not fake, that's standard. Standard made in China quality. Now, by fake, I mean like how inside China, fake vaccines had been made using saline to attract government subsidies for clinics offering emergency vaccinations. Recently, more than 80 people were arrested in a vaccine bust. They were part of a gang that made $3 million from selling water as COVID-19 vaccine shots. Authorities said the leader and his associates had sold nearly 60,000 syringes with fake vaccines across China. In a related case, another scammer shipped 600 doses of fake vaccines internationally via Hong Kong for a profit of $140,000. In other cases, counterfeit vaccines were being sold at inflated prices in Chinese hospitals. And other criminals also conducted inoculation programs of their own and had village doctors vaccinate people with fake jabs in their homes and cars. My advice? If a guy dressed like a doctor pulls up in a van and offers to stick a needle in you, walk away. In fact, run away. Now obviously the Chinese Communist Party is concerned, not because fake vaccines mean more people could die from COVID. If the CCP actually cared about human life, they'd stop killing people for their organs. No, the CCP is concerned because, as state-run media puts it, these fake vaccines being sent overseas tarnishes the image of the country. And tarnishing the image of the country is Beijing's job. Last month, the Supreme People's Procuratorate, which is like China's Attorney General, announced it would take action. It said it would deepen its crackdown on fake vaccine manufacturing, and that there were more than 21 cases of major vaccine fraud across China. Which is to say, if the top level of the Chinese government is getting involved, fake vaccines could be a much more widespread issue than state-run media will admit. Here's another perspective. The co-founder of one Chinese NGO said the focus on criminal activity was a distraction from the genuine threat to people's health from shoddy, out-of-date, and incorrectly handled vaccines from legitimate sources. Great. So you can't trust the legitimate sources of the vaccine either. Sadly, there's nothing new about fake and low-quality vaccines in China. This article from 5 years ago talks about how Chinese authorities pledged to crack down on the black market sale of vaccines for meningitis and rabies. That was after a case was made public involving nearly $90 million worth of illegal vaccines that were suspected of being sold in dozens of provinces. And that crackdown definitely happened and solved the vaccine problem forever. Obviously, fake products are sold all the time in China. From silly things like knockoff Nike sandals and problematic KFC, to more serious products like fake alcohol, which can kill you. and fake baby formula, which can kill your baby. So fake vaccines are just another item in a long list of fake products. Why are fake products so common in China? Well, criminals are going to be criminals. But it's hard to really crack down on them when the government is also run by a bunch of criminals. Because sometimes criminals collude with each other. The Chinese government might pass a bunch of regulations, but the system is so deeply corrupt that enforcement is close to impossible. And a lot of times, when the government announces a big crackdown, it's only for political reasons. They want to look like the good guy and get Western media to write glowing articles about how China is saving the world. Meanwhile, Chinese state-run media are doing whatever they can to discredit COVID vaccines that aren't from China. As the Global Times says, the U.S. can either continue to blame and malign China or join it to help develop and distribute life-saving vaccines around the world. I'm going to give that a hard pass. Interestingly, Chinese state-run media started on this kick of trying to discredit other countries' vaccines after that study came out saying the Chinese Sinovac vaccine was only 50% effective. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. But will China's vaccine propaganda succeed? Well, in a recent poll in Taiwan, it showed that only 1.3% of the population would be willing to get a Chinese COVID vaccine. And now that you've watched this episode, you know why. And now it's time for me to answer a question from you, a viewer who supports China Uncensored on Patreon. Barton Blackerby asks, "Hey Chris, I saw that the CCP is broadcasting their propaganda even in Times Square. And here's a link with a photo. How much have they infiltrated our media?" Good question, Barton. The answer is complicated. An ad in Times Square probably doesn't accomplish much aside from wasting Chinese taxpayer money. I'd hardly call that infiltrating our media. The main ways the CCP infiltrates Western media is by pressuring them to self-censor. Take NBC, which has a multi-billion-dollar deal to broadcast the 2022 Beijing Olympics. It's a big risk for them to do too much critical reporting on China. Or take the Washington Post and the New York Times. Until recently, they both took money in exchange for having Chinese propaganda inserts like this. But more importantly, the billionaire owners of these companies have substantial business interests tied to China. Easier to self-censor than anger the CCP. Having been in the news business for a long time, I can tell you that for every story you hear about, a dozen equally important stories get left on the editing room floor, as they say. The CCP knows it's hard to get media to directly publish propaganda, but it's easy to get them to simply ignore certain critical stories. That being said, the media in the US aren't monolithic. There are some smaller media that are doing a great job covering China. And even from big media like the New York Times, you can get individual reporters with good China stories. But my point is, if there were no influence from the CCP, American media as a whole would treat China much more like we treated the Soviet Union. A serious threat instead of an ally we should be getting vaccines from. Thanks for your question, Barton. Be like Barton and support China Uncensored by contributing $1 or more per episode through the crowdfunding website Patreon. Go to patreon.com/China Uncensored to learn more. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.